All right, everyone, welcome back to Get NIST-y, the series that breaks compliance out of the checkbox trap and turns it into a real security advantage. No fluff, no FUD, just practical strategies to make compliance work for your MSP. I'm Jared Kasner, and I'm joined as always by my co-founder of Blacksmith InfoSec and co-host of Get NIST-y, Michael Zabarski.
Hey, everyone.
Before we jump in today, this week Anthropic announced that one of their suppliers was compromised, leading to Mythos and all of their in-development models being leaked. If you missed our earlier episode, Season 2, Episode 14, which aired on April 7th, on supply chain and third-party risk management, do yourself a favor, go back and listen to that one next. This week's Mythos mess is really a fresh reminder that your vendors, and the shortcuts that people take around access all become your problem eventually. We already did the deeper dive there. Today we're going to build on that just a little bit. Mike, you want to go ahead and ask our first question for today?
Yeah. We keep talking about vendor questionnaires, SOC 2 reports, but do you actually factor vendor vulnerabilities and recent security incidents into your vendor risk process? Or are most teams still just checking the box?
Uh, so the answer is yes. Right, the reality is you should be factoring in recent security incidents and vendor vulnerabilities into your vendor risk process. And it's okay for vendors to have vulnerabilities and recent security incidents as long as they are doing the right things and talking about them publicly and what they are doing to respond to them and how they are changing their processes and their procedures to address them. And it's also very much true that most teams are still just checking the box and, oh, there's a SOC 3. Great. And just for people who aren't aware, SOC 3 is essentially the public version of a SOC 2 report. So it's just a letter from the auditor that says they passed the SOC 2 without giving any of the details of the SOC 2. It's typically a SOC 2 report is going to be covered by an NDA. And so the SOC 3 is essentially the public version of that. And it's because you're not getting any of the detail with the SOC 3. If all you're doing is downloading and saying, oh, I've got a SOC 3 and they passed, therefore I can go, you're doing yourself and your clients and your users a disservice. And so there's sort of some blanket statements of like, yes, both of your question, both aspects of your question are true. You should be doing it. And also most people are not. So Mike,
Yeah.
what else do you want to add here?
So I was actually having a really interesting conversation at dinner yesterday with a different CISO at an SMB locally here, where they are a healthcare company that helps. They're not a healthcare exchange by any stretch of the imagination, but they help connect basically healthcare exchanges to insurance companies, etc. And we were actually talking about something very tangential to this, as far as him hating to get third-party risk assessment questionnaires and what he's done internally to help him with that. Because one of the things that he encounters is somebody will announce a vulnerability and it's within their software bill of materials. It's one of their suppliers. And all of a sudden, some of their clients are coming to them because their clients are massive organizations, they're hospital systems, etc., that are all of a sudden saying, hey, we know you use this. They've just announced this. What's going on with this? How are you dealing with this, etc.? And what he struggles with is just because someone announces a critical vulnerability doesn't mean it's a critical vulnerability for him, right? Because it doesn't account for, hey, is it publicly accessible or publicly facing, or what are the other mitigations that he has in place to cover for this potential vulnerability? Yep. And so he uses the vulnerabilities to actually build a risk profile for that vulnerability that he then discloses to his clients to say, hey, yes, they announced the critical vulnerability in this package, but for us, this is actually a low or a medium or whatever the case may be, right? Which I actually really like that approach from a vendor standpoint of yes, but, or yes, and. But the reality of it is just his clients are asking those questions, and you should be asking those questions of your suppliers.
Yeah.
And that's really the big piece here, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And we saw this even, we talked about Season 2, Episode 14 that we referenced earlier, talked about the Axios compromise. Well, that was one specific version of Axios. And so if you never installed that version, then as a vendor, you were not at risk at all. And so, yes, completely agree with you that it's not even just the vendor or the third party supplier announced that there was a vulnerability, that even a highly exploitable vulnerability like the one with the Axios incident, it's what does that mean for my organization and for my clients? And so, and I think to Mike's point, we need to demand better of our vendors and ask them. We saw at Blacksmith, we saw this like very clearly with the Axios incident, where several of our vendors reached out to us saying, "Hey, we want you to know, yes, we use Axios. No, we didn't use that vulnerable that specific version in any of our production code. Here are some client libraries that we also publish that are open source that relied and may have included that vulnerable package. And so it's not just enough for you to look at your own software bill of materials. It's also, you need to go and look at our software bill of materials. And did you install this specific version of our third-party libraries or our open source library, right?" So to me, those are the vendors that I really enjoy working with the most, because they're the ones who are coming proactively and telling me, like, here are the specific scenarios in which you might be vulnerable to our supply chain risk that we introduced to you. And silence sometimes is an indication that nothing bad happened, and silence sometimes is an indication that they don't know, and silence is sometimes an indication of, like, I'm trying to keep this quiet intentionally. And so to Mike's point, by having these conversations, by forcing the conversation, by going and asking your suppliers, "Hey, I read about this thing. Does this affect us?" Even if you don't have the full software bill of materials, still getting in the habit of asking, "Does this impact me?" And like, that can be a very useful exercise to understand what their response looks like.
Yep. And there's some other cool stuff he was doing, leveraging AI to kind of say, hey, like, he actually built an internal AI model around, hey, here's the product, and now here's the vulnerability, and how do we analyze risk? So it was a good conversation. Highly recommend going out and talking with different people.
Yeah, there are some cool things that people have done also, essentially treating their all of their vendor documents as a RAG, and being able to do, like, when their salespeople are filling out security questionnaires, I was talking to a friend of mine who built out all of his internal documentation and vendor documentation, so all of his supply chain, retrieval augmented generation, so that RAG model. And now he's built a Slack bot, so his internal salespeople who are filling out security questionnaires can chat with this bot in Slack. He gets a full audit of it, because it's all only that bot's only available in a public channel, so he gets to see everything that's happening and what the responses are, and that way he can kind of audit it along the way and make sure that the responses that it's generating are actually accurate. And it only responds if it has a high enough degree of confidence in the answer. Also, otherwise it refers it over and automatically opens a ticket for the security team to go off and research. Now, this is a much larger organization, and not every MSP or MSP client has that capability. But there are things that we can be doing to give ourselves, using AI, some tools to make our lives a little bit easier as we're filling out these third-party risk assessments, but also as we're evaluating the responses that come back from those third-party questionnaires, right? As you're evaluating the risk of your vendors, understand what that means. And like I said, it's okay if your vendors have had security incidents. Like, people are human. Like, they make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, and it has to be okay to make mistakes. What can never be okay is covering up those mistakes, trying to downplay or minimize the impact of those mistakes, right? So we need to understand what the response looks like and how they are learning and growing and changing to prevent that category of mistake from happening again.
Yep.
So I know this was a relatively quick answer, but Mike, anything else you want to add to this before we jump into our second question for today?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. And yeah, the other piece, and I know Jared and I've stressed this before, but if you're gonna go do supply chain risk management and send the questionnaires, which you absolutely should, actually look at the responses. Like,
Yeah,
I've seen too many times people collect forms, and that's all they do. Actually, look at them.
Cool. All right, so let's transition into question 2 then. So everyone in compliance tooling says they do automated evidence collection and agent-driven controls now. How much of that is actually real, and how much is it just expensive wallpaper over manual work? Can we answer yes again? There is absolutely some like real stuff there. There is absolutely some expensive wallpapering over manual work. This is such a broad topic here too, and so Mike, let me let you take a first crack at this one.
Yeah. So there are two issues that that Jared and I see with automated evidence collection, and one of them is easier to solve for. The other one is more difficult. The easier one is if you build APIs into systems to do automated evidence collection. You have to maintain those APIs, and if something changes or the API returns something, I believe the technical term is wonky, Jared. You need to somehow still have a human there to review what it returns and say, hey, does this make sense, and be able to actually understand that. You cannot just say, great, we got green check mark, we're done. Like, you need to actually see what it pulled back, make sure it makes sense, review it, and then approve it as evidence. The other issue with automated different platforms that do automated evidence collection is going to be the fact that they do that for the systems that they have integrations built for. And so if they don't have an integration, then they're not doing automated evidence collection in those systems. And that kind of goes into really the second bullet point, which is the bigger issue, is human psychology of when evidence is automatically collected for your systems. And even if you review it, if you don't just click check, we're done. Thinking about stuff holistically and making sure you're thinking about your whole security program and not just the stuff that's connected to it and not the stuff that's configured, right? So, for example, if you connect the platform to Microsoft 365, it checks your conditional access rules, says MFA is enforced, you're done, great. Doesn't account for all your other systems, right? And so they may have a connector into your HR system. They may have a connector into your accounting system if you're using systems that are prolific enough for them to build these connectors into. But if you're a healthcare organization, they probably don't have a connector into your EHR system or your EMR system, right? And so that human psychology piece is not a platform issue, it's a human issue, right? It is a, hey, some evidence was collected, I got a green check mark, I'm good, I'm done, move on, right? Like, that's the part that's really difficult to solve for, is the how do you prompt people to think more holistically as they build their security program to make sure the security program encompasses their whole organization, all their systems, all their line of business apps, etc., right? Jared, I've ranted for a good couple minutes here.
Yeah. So I will also just say, pay attention to system capabilities versus marketing hype, right? We've seen at least one automated evidence collection system that is in deep trouble right now because they promised to do a whole bunch of stuff. And the promises don't live up to reality, right? So AI can do an awful lot of things for you. One thing it cannot do is own your risk. One thing AI cannot do the work for you. AI, automated evidence collection, none of those things are a substitute for doing the right thing. And so you are still going to be, even when you are getting that automation, whether it's AI or manual, like, and I say manual meaning, or maybe better said legacy, where it's that API driven, like direct API driven, that automated evidence collection is still only as good as the work that you were putting into it. And it's kind of building off of what Mike was saying there, that it like, nothing in life is free. And so if something is promising you free or it will do it all for you. Guess what? It is almost certainly going to play in that human psychology aspect that Mike was talking about, where it's giving you a false sense of security and a false sense of compliance that is not going to stand up to scrutiny. And so you absolutely have to be in there owning your risk and owning your security program yourself. Like nothing, you cannot absolve yourself of the responsibility there. All you can do is give yourself tools. And don't get me wrong, there is a very valid and real use case for why automation is important, right? We have limited hours in the day, and collecting the evidence on a regular basis, like that takes time. And so that care and feeding is important. And we absolutely encourage finding the ways to automate things in a rational and sensible way. But an emphasis on that rational and sensible, because automation, you will end up creating a lot more work for yourself if the automation is not done correctly, right? And we talked about this a little bit last week. Process and automation, those are your engine. This is the Ronnie Parasella quote: process and automation are your engine. AI is your turbo or your accelerant. If you don't have the automation and the like, if the engine's not running well, throwing a turbo onto it is just going to slam you into a wall really fast.
You're nitrous.
So get the
nitrous.
Nitrous, yeah. Going back to the 90s, like, come on.
Yeah. Fast and Furious,
too fast,
baby.
too furious, bro. Come on. Right. So like, it does require thought and care and feeding. There is no easy button. There are ways to make compliance easier. There are ways to make evidence collection easier, but there is nothing that's going to be the easy button that will do it all for you in a way that is actually going to make you more compliant or more secure. At least not today. We're recording this on April 22nd, 2026. I would love to be proven wrong sometime in the future, but today there is nothing that will do this work for you. And maybe that will never happen. Maybe it will sometime in my lifetime. Maybe it'll be this year. Maybe it'll be 20 years from now. I don't know. But as of today, nothing can do this for you.
Yeah. And then there's the, I'll point out, bad logic where, and Jared and I have seen this a couple of different times in different platforms where something will be checked or not checked, and then it'll say, hey, 0 out of 0 controls passed, and give you a green check mark because there's nothing there, right? And so is the data you're getting back good? Once you get that data, assuming it's good, or rather correct, not necessarily good, are you evaluating correctly and marking controls complete or incomplete accurately? And then there's the human psychology aspect of it, of how do you keep poking and prodding the human behind all of it to say, yes, we need to think about this holistically.
Yeah. And I would say 0 out of 0 is objectively bad. Not is this good or bad? 0 out of 0 being let me rephrase that. 0 out of 0 being a green check mark is objectively bad, right?
So let me rephrase. Yeah. What I meant was, there's the aspect of when you get data back, that data being good or bad, meaning is the data you're getting back correct or incorrect, right? Because if they change an API call, you could just get bad data back. If you get good data, whether the stuff is existent or non-existent, whether that should be a 0 out of 0, right? That is good because you got the correct data. Next step is, what are you doing with that data for evaluation?
Cool. All right. Anything else we want to add to this one, Mike, or should we wrap for today?
I think we can wrap for today.
All right. You're on. Wrap.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's content, please share this episode with a friend. If you joined us for the first time, hitting that follow button helps us discover us in the future. Helps others discover us in the future. It means you won't miss an episode. And as always, you can submit your own questions at blacksmithinfosec.com/ask. See you guys next week.
Get NIST-y. Yeah, we're bringing the heat. Cyber strong compliance on repeat. Get NIST-y. Let's secure your fate with Blacksmith InfoSec.